Okay, I think I'm going to give, and we have started the recording. Awesome. I'm starting sharply at 3:02.
6:02.
Actually, what I'll do now is just share my screen. Okay, everyone. Well, thank you so much for joining me today for our webinar. I am so excited to be moderating the second part of our event series. And we have with us today an amazing panelist of entrepreneurs across several healthcare verticals. I'm so excited to get into the discussion with them. And I just know that their insights are going to be so useful, thought-provoking, and inspiring to our audience members today. However, before we get into the discussion and before I introduce them, I just want to recap a few housekeeping items. First, if you attended the first event, you know that our panelists were just stellar. They had some really great thoughts on investing considerations and also on the topic of underrepresentation in healthcare. And so you can find that recording on Black VC's YouTube channel. You can look at the entire thing there. And there you will see the framework that we use to guide our discussion, and also hear some of the important takeaways that we covered, including understanding the relevant stakeholders in the ecosystem and making sure that the value is clear to them, knowing how to evaluate and manage regulatory risk, and understanding whether a company has the right team as the business changes and evolves. And with our current panelists, we'll just touch on a couple of these topics today. The second housekeeping item is our BIPOC healthcare survey. We are using this as a way to engage and collaborate within the healthcare venture ecosystem for underrepresented founders. So if you have not yet completed that survey, somebody will put it in the chat box, either Colade or Chris. Can you please add that to the chat box so that the attendees can sign up for it? Now, the idea here is not to reinvent the wheel. We know that there already exist tons of great resources available that are specifically geared towards this community, but we want to find a way to, one, just know who is in the community, either from the perspective of an investor or an operator, a strategic, an advisor, consultant. We want to be able to curate that list of resources for the community and then put that together in a way that's easily digestible and accessible in order to drive engagement, drive collaboration. And as Chidozi very aptly put it on our last panel, we need more BIPOC people in the lobby so that they can get into the room where it happens. And I could not agree anymore. So if you have not yet completed that survey, please use the link that's being shared. We need to know about people who are active in this community, resources that are active in this community. Use the survey to put that, or even message me directly. Third housekeeping item is our Q&A. As we did before, later on, we will open up to audience questions. I will start things off with questions to the panelists, but we will open it up. You don't have to wait until we get to the Q&A section. If you have a question as we go through the discussion, add it to the Q&A. We will try to get to all of the questions closer to the end of the discussion. And of course, get your thinking caps on. We do have our Zoom polls again, just to challenge your knowledge and to educate you. It's okay if you don't get the answer right. It's about education. And the good thing is everybody is going to get an A for effort, okay? So without any further ado, it is my great pleasure to introduce our panelists for today. Amazing, amazing women. And I'll just go in the order that I see them on my screen, and let me stop sharing here. But we have Lorenna, who is the co-founder and CEO of DiaM Life. This is a diabetes care management platform utilizing neuropsychology and contextual AI to drive engagement and outcomes. We have Ellington West from Sanavi Labs. They are developing the first digital stethoscope that listens to lung sounds, extracts insights so that care for acute and chronic patients can be better managed. And we have Maria from Envisagenics. They are building an AI, ML, RNA exon platform that leverages a proprietary database of splice variants to develop new and effective treatments. So please welcome our panelists. And to kick things off, I would love to ask each of you to briefly introduce yourself, give a bit more context than I shared on your background. Tell us about your company, what you're building, and specifically let the audience know what pain point are you trying to solve and how are you trying to solve that. Feel free to jump in, whoever wants to kick it off.
Well, I guess I'll go ahead and start. Hi, everyone. I'm Lorenna. I'm the CEO of DiaM Life, and we're building a unified platform that's seeking to empower and support people with diabetes by bringing all the different stakeholders within that unified platform. And one of the pain points that for us is very important in solving is how do we improve health? How do we help them get healthier and live longer and live safer? So it's a very critical necessity, obviously, to want to live a healthier life. So for us, that's really our mission, is how can we create something, a solution through digital health that can really bind all those individuals that empower that person, but that also are responsible for their care.
I'll jump in, and that's amazing. Ellington West, CEO and co-founder of Sanavi Labs. So Sanavi Labs is a medical device and software company that's harnessing the power of AI to really transform the way we detect, diagnose, and manage respiratory diseases. So the pain point that we're really actively working to combat is access to a timely diagnosis or notifying patients who are struggling with COPD or asthma in advance of an exacerbation. So we basically just created probably the newest, best stethoscope in the world, in that it acts just like a stethoscope in its ability to identify or extract body sounds. But instead of needing a physician to analyze those sounds, we've embedded algorithms right on board the device that can diagnose with the same accuracy as a trained physician. And this was so important to us because we need to bridge the gap when it comes to access. We need to create trust. We need to create ability for patients to really appropriately manage their own health and to empower community health workers to also be able to aid in that process.
Absolutely. And I like that for you, Ellington, with your AI built into the device, you're not taking the physician out of the loop, but you're trying to make the physician smarter by adding the AI to act as that decision support and really be objective in determining, how the patient needs to be treated. Great. Maria?
Yeah, Luisa, Pineda. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Envisagenics. Envisagenics, we have a, novel way of kind of going and analyzing sequencing data from patients and trying to identify the new variants. I think the pinpoint that we try to use our platform for is to accelerate drug discovery. And by analyzing the human genome in a different way, we don't care about genes. We have our own gene metrics in different ways to identify them. We're an RNA company, so identifying in a different way disease-specific targets. So once we identify them, we could then design therapeutics with machine learning for them. So the premise is, the future of medicine is getting, at least for oncology and some CNS disorders, getting the sequencing done for the patient, stratifying the patient, identifying targets, and then treating them with personalized medicine. And I think, companies like mine are the future of medicine. And so we've been building it for almost 8 years now. And we're excited to partner with biopharmas to jointly develop therapeutics and also do some ourselves with RNA.
And I so love that we are seeing so many more RNA therapeutics companies on the market. And I hope that after everything that we went through with COVID and the rise of mRNA vaccines, that the general public is a bit more knowledgeable about what RNA is and not afraid of it.
Correct. So we're happy about that.
Yep, absolutely. My next question to you is, why healthcare in the first place? Why were you so passionate about this? And I want to frame this question in the context of, traditionally, or in some spaces, I've heard that when people think about the types of companies that underrepresented founders should be building, they like to pigeonhole them to one thing that, describes them, whether it's Black or female or LGBT, and that's all you should focus on because that's who you are, even though that's not all of what you are. And all of you have taken a very ambitious goal to go beyond that pigeonholing and build products and companies for the masses. So my question, why healthcare in that context, and how, if you ever encountered any of that sort of narrative, how were you able to push past that?
Yeah, I'll jump in. So for me, is that okay? Is that okay? So for me, it was really about how could I not choose healthcare, right? So when it was brought to my attention that one child every 39 seconds under the age of 5 unnecessarily loses their life to pneumonia, which is a detectable and treatable disease, kind of sit there with yourself and you say, well, if I know this information and I know that there's a solution and I don't do anything about that, then who am I and why am I here? So for me, I think that healthcare is probably one of the most difficult sectors to be successful in. I think that all of the women on this panel will hands down agree that like we chose Everest as our first mountain to climb as we were learning, really just footing and all of that, right? But it, at least in my case, was that there wasn't an alternative route, that we had to choose the hard task because we knew that, at least in my case, the problems were disproportionately impacting communities of color. So very rarely do you see representation in medical device design or in therapeutic design. And I think that that has perpetuated distrust, appropriately so, from communities of color to the healthcare system in general, right? Because we've been generally underserved. So for me, it was, how do we not only change the relationship between community and healthcare, but also what role can we play in ensuring that the representation is happening on the highest level? So I saw the uniqueness of my diversity that I was able to bring to the table as an absolute advantage for opening up the scope and lens of what we really can do with these types of devices or these types of therapeutics.
Great, and we will definitely get to that representation question. That was great. Go ahead, Maria.
I think for me, you know, I mean, like you, I've been trained in the sciences for a really long time, over a decade, even longer. I mean, I've done science since I was 15 years old, since I moved to this country from Colombia. So I've always, you know, kind of saw that as a, you know, that's what I've been trained for. I didn't really care about my color or skin color or anything. I just care of, I've been trained from some of the best mentors, best institutions around the world. And I should do what I can, like the best I can do. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing was, while I was doing that, you know, you start kind of saying, well, if that guy could do it, why can't I do it? If that person cannot do it, why can I do it? We need that's missing. You know, maybe I could combine them and get something out. I agree with Ellington, like you don't know how difficult it is when you're building it. But, you know, I think I started kind of realizing the more and more, you know, I did it, the more I was a reference to other, you know, people of color. Because even for women, so not only women of color, but at least 90% of our applicants, every time we have a job posting, are female. And I asked my HR, why is that? And then now he has into the questionnaire about everybody that, you know, interviews for the company, you know, how did you know? What did you do? And some of them is that women feel more comfortable applying to the roles because there's a CEO, it's a female-led company. So they feel more comfortable. They feel like they can get it. So they apply for it. When in other ones, they don't. So, you know, some of my male colleagues or Caucasian, you know, AI companies don't even get female applicants, and they're always like, where are they? You know, we can never find them. And I said, that's impossible. I get 90% out of 400 applicants. Most of them are female. So I think just, you know, you kind of have to kind of keep pushing the boundaries and believe in yourself and continue doing something and surround yourself with people that can help you achieve, you know, anything and everything that you need to in healthcare. Because I mean, I do unmet needs where children can't even move a single muscle, where, you know, women with triple negative breast cancer continue dying on me patients with ALS continue to try to give me their samples because, they can't see their children, they can't talk to them anymore. Like, they keep dying on us. So if we don't accelerate and innovate how therapeutics are being done, these patients are going to keep dying on us, and research is not being done fast enough.
I know for
Great.
myself.
So many great points there.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
and
Lorenna.
one thing I wanted to mention, compared to both of you that obviously have a bit more of a medical experience, I have none. I have zero medical experience. With me, this entire journey started because I'm actually the mom of 2 children with type 1 diabetes, and I lost my grandmother to type 2. And I'm a 3-time founder, but coming from the business side and saying, I want to build a medical company, I really kind of had to sit down and analyze, first of all, is there a gap? Is there a need? Is there something that I see that others don't? And I think my own personal experience is really what built our vision as a company. When we analyzed our competitors, when we analyzed the healthcare industry, and specifically in my sector, there's less than 12 brown, Black individuals and women in just out of 50 of the top 50. And that was a little bit shocking to me. So I knew I had quite a route to take, especially as a non-medical person. But as bittersweet as my personal journey was, I felt empowered to create change, I think, because there were 2 elements really that pushed me. And it was one, that there was a massive hole in how businesses were structuring care and how businesses were structuring empowerment, primarily not just with everyday people who have insurance, but more with underrepresented individuals and rural communities and with BIPOC communities. I think that our overall vision wasn't just about improving care and helping people get better. It's how can we tap into those individuals that don't have the financial resource, the social economics, the transportation, to really improve their own lives. So for us, our entire mission is based on empowerment and being that bridge between the patient and the doctor. So as a technology company, when we started building, it was very exciting. It was very nerve-wracking. I've had to surround myself with a really robust team of medical experts, digital health experts, a great software development team in order to be able to validate and prove that I'm a business person, but I can build a digital health company. So through my own experience as a brown Latina mom who knows nothing about medicine, I've had to kind of build from the ground up and surround myself with that team. So it's been quite the journey, but I feel that we really have, as females, as women of color, we have such a great responsibility and such a great trajectory to really create some massive change in the industry and shake it up a little bit, which is very much needed.
Absolutely.
So
yes. And this is exactly why the representation matters. We're all paving the way for others to come up behind us. And we'll definitely touch on that in a little bit more. Now, just to go into your companies a bit more, and you're all in very different spaces: biotech, medtech, digital health. But there's some unifying themes, and one of those is data. And in today's venture ecosystem, data is king, data is gold. Everybody is trying to get their hands on and use data to a certain degree. So there's this element of using data to make things more effective or less inefficient. And I want to understand and have you share with the audience, in the early stages of building your companies, what were some of the challenges of building a data-rich company? How did you even get your hands on the data sets that you needed? How did you think about the roles that you needed to put into the company to get started, knowing that data is such a big part of companies in today's venture ecosystem?
I mean, I could start with that. I started my company around 8 years ago, and sequencing data was starting to become a little cheaper, a little faster, but it was still kind of like a thing of the future. However, when I was starting, I think some of the first investors I went, which were life sciences, they're like, that's going to take you 20 years, Maria. That's impossible. That's going to cost you tons. But then what I realized is I had to learn the industry and the market and start talking with the people that were actually making that data and what they could do with the data. And when I quickly realized is that there was so much data out there that people just didn't understand what to do with it. So then I realized we were actually in an advantage because we had a platform that could leverage and analyze data and extract knowledge out of things that people didn't have, couldn't do anything with. So what we could do earlier on was like, hey, we can use your data, repurpose it, and extract knowledge and work on that knowledge together. So we purposely can, make or jointly develop a therapeutic together. So, it kind of flipped the view of data and the acquisition. The data is the important part. Data is not the important part. If you have shitty data in, you got shitty data out. So at the end of the day, you just have to.
We're getting to that.
Yeah. So then what I learned the system. So I ended up applying for grants at NIH, the Genomic Medicine Center, from HHS, from the Canton Center, from different institutes. And once you had government awards and you were a sub-awardee, I kind of went around because then I was able to get access to some of that data because the government had spent $1 trillion to get all that sequencing done, and it was sitting in repositories. So then what I did was getting to build a cloud computing platform with all cloud service providers, Google, Amazon, and Microsoft, and work with them directly so we could look at the bottlenecks, extract that data, and be able to analyze it and take advantage of it. But, that allowed us to not only get non-dilutive funding, but also get access to thousands and thousands of data that even academic institutes couldn't. So yeah, it's something for biotechs. And if you're interested, I think that's the way we went.
Any of the other panelists want to weigh in?
I just would echo that completely, in that for us, it was, we were able to create the largest pediatric respiratory database in the world because we had the support of the Gates Foundation when we first started, right? And that was a huge advantage for us that put us leaps and bounds ahead of any of our competitors and just really also supported the accuracy, right, of our algorithm. But it all really got interesting when we started making meaningful I would say insights as a result of that data, right? So to Maria's point, it's one thing to have a ton of data. It's another thing to really make that meaningful and to show value. So in our ability to show value through that, we were able to then be awarded multiple NIH grants that then further supported our ability to collect even more data. And also the relationships that we have with universities and institutions around the world, because to us, two things were very important: consent and diversity in the data. And so that was something that we were very driven by. Initially, we said, okay, well, we're working in emerging markets and it's really just Malawi, Bangladesh, Peru. And then we said, well, what can we do and where's our reach in North America? What are we doing in Asia? What are we doing in Europe? And so when we really started building this out, we learned a lot also in that over that time frame of being able to pull in the right data also, right? So the journey for us was definitely defined by support from the Gates Foundation and then NIH support and then university partnerships and the like.
That's great.
And
you both,
the same idea.
Go ahead, Lorenna, go ahead.
I want to say I echo the same. Partnerships are critical for any healthcare company, especially as you're growing. And I think there's so many grants out there for healthcare organizations. We just have to look in the right place. So I very much echo what they said and encourage that for anyone that's starting a healthcare company or that's looking to build connections and doesn't know where to start.
Great. So one point that you both touched on, both Maria and Ellington alluded to, is this idea of having good quality data and diverse data sets. A big topic in this whole data world is algorithm bias and bias in healthcare data that exacerbates some of the inequities that we see in the healthcare ecosystem. And I mean, it's very huge. I understand that there's a fine line between building your algorithms to optimize a particular treatment of care for a subpopulation versus building algorithms that just reflect the societal biases and then exacerbate them. So from your perspective, given that your companies are so data rich, how have you thought about this issue in terms of making sure that the algorithms that you're building, the data that goes in, isn't exacerbated the inequities, or what have you seen as thoughtful ways to manage that?
I think honestly, there's such a level of difficulty in honoring that and being consistent in that space. And I say that because we're all also learning in real time, right? We're like in the wild west of AI and what works and what doesn't. And so for us, we operate in 10 countries on 5 continents and are growing. And so, and that's in terms of like our collection of data and the partnerships that we have that are structuring these clinical studies that we're doing to really reflect populations that we seek to address. So for us, it's maybe we don't cast the wide net and say that this is a one size fits all for everyone, because that's not it. With our device itself also, we focus on creating a baseline per patient and creating their norm, right? So we want to build more than anything the most personalized experience that we can. And so in order to do that, we have this giant funnel that's incredibly diverse, and then we bring it in and we continue to bring it in so that we're really just focusing down to the individual, because our patient in Baltimore is very different than the one in rural Nebraska, regardless of race and weight and demographic. There are just personal nuances. That's really what we're going after in acoustic signatures, for us at least.
Yeah, look,
And
for us for biopharma, I think it's a big difficulty, and I think you've seen now a lot of the pharmas how to, even for COVID-19 trials, they had to stop, diversify, and then start again, because we don't get representation. Our communities are not used to getting attention or even the help or even the ability to get treatment, period. Health insurance, it's big discrepancy. So there's a lot of discrepancies that are socioeconomic that we have to address as a global community first. And I think pharmas are trying to, they're hiring people, so there's diversity and inclusion. So D&I within the clinical trials, there's a couple companies that are starting to do that help us manage that diversity within the clinical trials, because at the end, for companies like mine, we just get the data after the patients go to the clinic, after the patients get treatment, after they've been seen. But if our communities don't go to the hospital, don't get treatment, don't get anything, then we don't get that data. So then we're building therapies for people that don't look like us, not for my mother, not for my grandmother, not for your grandmothers. So that's not effing fair. So how do we fix that? It's by really, I think it's a top-bottom approach, and government accountability and D&I, and making sure that all the foundations are also aware, because foundations and patient advocacy groups have a huge say on how to treat. So my fun project is to work with foundations to get, to our communities, access to sequencing, access to personalized medicine, access to different type of treatments and therapies and technologies that they weren't. So that's like my fun project to do with, 5 or 6 advocacy groups and a couple of government and few, pharmas and a couple startups. So you see, it's like something that we're doing across, and it involves several people. And it's really, really difficult, but if we don't push it and we don't try and ask these difficult questions and hold people accountable in all stages, from pharma CEOs to our government officials to different presidents in different countries, then we're not gonna succeed, because it's a global program. Healthcare is a global program, not the US problem. But if we can solve it here, at least try it, then we could showcase how we can do that for other countries afterwards.
Yeah, and just one comment, because there's this important, some of our funding came from the NIH Minority Health and Health Disparities wing. And to me, that's such an important thing to draw attention to. If you are someone who is, starting a company in the health tech digital space, and you're looking for someone or an institution to support you in finding those patients, I think that branch of the NIH is really focused and intentional in that regard. And I highly recommend forging relationships and figuring out how you might partner and work with them.
Good to know. And I think this is a great segue for our Zoom poll. So I'm going to launch the poll right now. Let's see. And I think I can allow the panelists to vote. Let's see here. Okay, so the first question, can everybody see the poll? Okay, great. So the first question, and these are all questions around data, because there's so many different types of data out there, consumer health data, medical record data. So the first question is around testing your knowledge of HIPAA. Company A compiles user data from multiple sources. It could be wearable data, your 23andMe DNA profile. It could be, activity data, and they put it all together to generate insights. They share it with their family and friends on the platform. Does company A need to be HIPAA compliant or not? I'm going to give you 2 more seconds for question 1, and then we'll move on to the other questions. Okay. So I'm going to pause the poll in here and just say that the answer to question 1 is no. Company A does not need to be HIPAA compliant, and that's because HIPAA compliance only relates to personal protected health information, where if it's being shared with somebody who's considered a covered entity, such as your doctor or your health insurer, it's being used to manage care or to determine if you're eligible for benefits, then it's considered protected health information and it's subject to HIPAA compliance. If it's just being shared with friends and family, then you don't have to worry about that. You're actually opting in to share. So the other thing that you panelists, you guys touched on, which was so important, is this area about getting access to these diverse data sets in the first place. And we know that clinical trials are a big part of that. And there's lots of reason why representation in clinical trials for BIPOC and underrepresented people has traditionally been low. Yes, some of it has to do with hesitancy, but there are a lot of other factors around access and knowledge just about these things that also inhibit and prevent more people from getting involved. So I'm going to launch the polls again, and the second question is around clinical trials. So let's go. So question number 2, what is a typical representation of Black, African, or Hispanics in oncology trials? And it's the same percent for both of them. And then for the second question, what percentage of participants in Moderna's phase 3 COVID vaccine trial were Black? I'll give you 20 more seconds. Just make your best guess effort. Okay, I am going to end the polling and share the results. So most of you said 1% for number 2. It is actually 4%. This is specific to oncology trials, 4% for both Blacks and Hispanics. And then what was great for the Moderna trial is that for Blacks, that number went up to 9.7%. And I think that's, a testament to how powerful I know that marketing campaigns can be. And I remember seeing ads where they showcase some of the people who were involved in developing the COVID vaccines, and there were people who looked like me. And I know the power of seeing that representation and how many barriers it might have broken down for people to say, well, if somebody who looks like me was developing that vaccine, I have a bit more trust. And so I'm willing to participate because I want to be counted. So thank you all. The number was 9.7% for the third question. So moving right along, and in the interest of time, because we do want to get to the audience questions, the last 2 topics I want to just discuss with the panelists here are around partnerships. All of you have done a really great and impressive job, and you've alluded to this a bit before about connecting with people at different points in your journey as a company to help accelerate either commercialization or getting access to the right data sets, that early building stage. So I would love for you to share with our audience members, especially those who are builders like yourself, how did you go about finding these partnerships in the first place? How did you make the decision about what stage in their company's life cycle it was, meaningful to engage? Because, partnerships are a two-way street. You're not getting in for free. There's something that you're giving up, either time, resources, equity, or whatever it is. And so how did you navigate that process of finding these partnerships to accelerate your company's growth?
I think for me, and first of all, I'm a pre-revenue company. I'm actually launching in a few months. So for me, it's been a very unique journey. Thank you. It's been a very unique journey in that, as we've been building, we've had to be very strategic about these relationships that we've built, that we're building. I can tell you right now, I'm a big networker. I will go to every event. I will meet every person. I will talk to everyone I possibly can. And I think part of the reason is because I want to immerse myself in the world of medicine. I want to build those relationships early. I want to start sharing my story. And more importantly, I want people to start letting me know what they think. I think that when I have an opportunity to either bring them on board, to open up that dialogue a lot more, I find that our success as a company has really come from this. We've had one conversation with one person, and that led to 10 doors opening, whether it was an investor, a potential partner, a potential advisor, and much, much more. And right now, for example, as I was studying the business and, where we want to be in 5 years and in 6 years, and we started identifying our growth, we were very strategic with regards to saying, if we want to be here, who do I need to start building a relationship with now? And one of my mentors from Harvard Business School, we were sitting down one day and talking, and he asked me a very open-ended question: who would you like to meet? Who would you like as a partner? And I told him exactly who I wanted, and that has opened a door that now is a massive element to my business, that is now growing significantly, that has built an amazing partnership for us. And it's just been, I would tell you, the last 2 months have just been absolutely crazy wonderful, because we've been building now significantly, all based on a single question and by putting myself out there. So I think, especially as a Hispanic woman, one of the things that I've experienced a lot of is, questioning my own ability. And I think that one of the things that I had to do early on was to set myself different, to let them know that, yes, I don't know medicine, but I know this, and I want to learn more, and I'm willing to do this. And that has really just allowed me now to be a person that can speak for health, that could speak for what we're building, and that more importantly can now create an avenue for change because I'm providing value. So that's one way in which we partook in that space.
Any other panelists?
Yeah, for us, the partnership element has been critical, and I struggled equally with this imposter syndrome, right? Of like, can I be in the room? Can I ask for help? What do I say? And I consider myself to be a very outgoing person, but I found myself paralyzed when walking into rooms. And the best thing that I could have done for myself was to bring on board our Chief Business Development Officer, who is a Black male who's about 6'4", part of the LGBTQ community, and is so clear about who he is and why he's here, that he eliminated every excuse that I could ever have for not showing up as the best version of myself, and to remove all of my fear. And so I think that we all struggle, and everybody has, the butterflies and doesn't know how to start a conversation. But once you get into it, and once you have someone that says, you know what, in the same question that Lorenna asked, that person asked her, is what do you need? Who do you need on your team to help you conquer these mountains, right? What is it going to take, and work backwards? And when we sat down with intentionality and we looked at it kind of like a sport. And we said, all right, who do we need to convert? Who do we need to get? So instead of me thinking, what will these people think of me and how is it going to go? It was like, in order for us to get this done and to show up, we need this person. So we're going out and we're getting them. And then what we realized was that we built out this incredible advisory board. And then it was our advisors network that was just really wrapping its arms around us and saying, we are going to be the complete wind behind you and push you to the next level. And then you get that personal validation and you know that you're headed in the right direction. But at first it is very scary and you don't know how to approach it. But when you think about it as like, this is a zero-sum game and I have to do it or else, then you know that you don't have a choice and you got to do it. So
I completely agree with both of them.
Really great points.
Yeah, I know that.
Go ahead, Maria.
I agree with both of you. I couldn't agree more. Okay. First of all, I think, you know, we as women and we as BIPOC founders, it's harder for us to get funding. That's a fact. So building companies like we do, you just have to figure out how to like make it and get it done. And because of who we are, again, like both of you, I'm you know, very A personality, super networker. So I've been to every single pharma meeting, been there, done that. And by doing that and just being my very salesy personality, also I'm a trained scientist, but very Colombian self, I cannot change who I am and what I was raised like and what my personality is. What I do is that I take it and work with it and make, you know, the best out of it, because I cannot be a white older male, you know, again, like this is me. So I work with what I have and I work to the best of my abilities. And by doing that, I've gotten some of the best mentors in the field, in the industry, and I've gotten myself into some of the best partnerships. So, you know, for J&J, when not only we won their AI Quick Fire Challenge, but we also became a J-Labs company, which one of you is as well. You get a mentor. And my mentor, when I presented to the board of Johnson & Johnson, it ended up being, you know, Paul Stoffels. Dr. Paul Stoffels is the chief scientific officer. He's the number 2. He's also vice chairman of the board of J&J. And, you know, he's like, Maria, he's Belgium, he's Maria. You and I look exactly the same. We're building the same type of companies. And I'm like, yeah, you and I look just the same. I agree 100% with you. But he couldn't be a better mentor and an ally for somebody like me, starting a company that's very different, that has a different business model, different achievement. And that allowed me to understand, you know, how do pharmas work and get his perspective, because he sold his company very successfully to Johnson. So understand how he did it, how he took it. He was an immigrant as well. So how he, you know, having an accent, selling with an accent, you know, discussing and building businesses in this country with an accent, not from here. So things that are very important, but getting those allies and those mentors, very important. And then surrounding yourself with advisors. I'm a very good networker and I get a lot of leads, but I needed a closer. So we got a closer, a de-risker. And that has helped my team to close deals, which is bringing revenue to my company and allowing me to grow and scale faster than I ever thought. Again, RNA has become really hot. So it just happens that I was building a company that now, you know, the industry and the market and the global economy and everybody knows how much could be useful for healthcare and our medical system. So, you know, just getting those two, I think, is extremely important.
That was great. I mean, so many great points there. Being your authentic self, you know, getting a diverse representation in your advisor and network group. That's so important. Now, quickly, before we go into the audience questions, my very last question to you, which Maria, you touched on a little bit at the end there, is funding. We know that underrepresented founders typically have a slightly slower start out the gate, because you can't just go to friends and family and raise that $1 million or $500K friends and family round, and you have to really bootstrap in the beginning. You're very capital efficient. Please share with the audience some of your learnings from going through the fundraise challenge, you know, going to people asking for money. What did you learn, pros and cons? What did you least expect? I mean, I want to like just share a little bit. Maria and I, we've talked about how, you know, you having an accent, you're an immigrant, I'm an immigrant as well, and feedback that you would get from investors saying that you have to speak differently to pitch your company, you know, like, so I want to hear some of the challenges and how you overcame them, you know, what you learned. Please share it with our audience. Fundraising.
I'll go ahead and start. I think that for me, fundraising, I bootstrapped for a very long time, and I had to build a lot of credibility and traction in order to get myself to that point where I was fundable, and that I can prove that it wasn't just an idea, it was actually a business that can solve a problem, that I was building the team. And it took time, it took a lot of time, but I was really able to surround myself first with that advisory board that was very strong, that really believed in me. They opened doors, you know, to different angel investors, to different individuals that I felt connected with us as a vision and a mission and our goals, and that saw, you know what, there's an opportunity here. But I really had to sit down and do my homework. I will admit that anytime I walked into a room and I'm surrounded by 6 men, you know, in video, and I have to sit there and not just talk about my knowledge, but I have to now talk about 20 additional points that potentially someone else didn't talk about, just so that I can get my point across that we are fundable. So I do admit to the fact that it's a challenge, but there are ways to get funding and to really bring attention to who you are and what it is that you're building. I did also want to share just one single story that was for me very impactful. I did a lot of competitions in the beginning. I really put myself out there as much as possible because I thought I need to get funding, I need to get grants, I need to get all this going on. And it was bittersweet in the sense that there were some that were really great, and there were some that were just a little bit scary because you get judged. And you get judged because you didn't talk fast enough, because they don't understand your business. And you start questioning yourself. Again, that imposter syndrome that you spoke about earlier, it happens a lot. And I think it's very important that no matter the business startup that we're building, to really be very focused on your vision, on your mission, and that you have something that can be impactful, because you will be questioned, and you will be questioned to the point where you will start doubting yourself. And fundraising is one of those things that really, really make you question everything. But there are routes, and you just need to surround yourself with the right people.
Great. Any other panelists?
I fully agree with that. I think that, you know, we started in competitions, which we learned a lot from up front. I got my ego completely squashed, thought that I had the worst idea ever. And then really you rework it. You get broke down and then you rework it, right? But then what I started doing was channeling white male energy from the Bay Area. And I said, I don't care. I'm showing up as is, authentic self. And what I'm focusing on here is that my idea, like, I was watching these pitches that they were doing, and I was like, he does not know what he's talking about. Like, literally, yet is closing like $5 million checks. So I was like, let me take notes here. Okay. So it's like big moods, big energy, a lot of confidence, and to say, why not me, right? And I remember, because I raised 80% of my capital outside of Baltimore, because we're in Baltimore, right? And that's changing right now. But even geographically, you have limitations. So I had raised a lot on the West Coast, but then when I came back home, I decided to hold people around me accountable, members of the community who had the ability to write checks and weren't writing them to me, but instead choosing companies outside of our state to invest in. So there was a really significant meeting that I had listened in on with the Goldman Sachs group and Dr. Ruth Simmons. And what she said was, women of color are over-mentored and underfunded, full stop. So when I start my meetings and end my meetings with that, let's face the unavoidable truth here. How are you showing up? What does the diversity look like in your portfolio companies? Because now I'm deciding if you're a good fit for me or not. And ooh, it's a power dynamic. It's a shift, but F that, right? Like, this is our time. And if what's standing in between my company being successful or not is you writing a check, I'm going to find some people who are going to write checks, and I'm not afraid of that reality, right? So that's kind of what happened to me.
That's amazing.
I feel like I have to throw
love
it
it.
there, Ellington. I love that. You are also evaluating the investors to see if they're a fit for you, and if diversity isn't important to them, then they're not a fit for you. I love that power shift. Go ahead, Maria.
But I think I 100% right. First of all, we have to get into the boys club in order to get funded. I do have like 4 billionaires in my cap table, and if I didn't get one, I wouldn't have gotten the other 3, because once I got one, the other one was like, I want to match what he did and double it. And I said, no, you can't, because I want all of you to own the same. And that was a strategy that I did, because I was playing, you have to play the game. You have to build your company and figure it out. There's so many pitches that have absolutely nothing, and they just throw money at them just because they look like them. Basically, that's just who, this person or this person that was intro. Only by warm intros you get funded. So get yourself out there, network with any of us. Like, a good idea comes out of anywhere. Literally, like, I sound like a movie, but it's so true. And you never know which one's gonna be, the right one. So I sometimes even ask my own investors, like, how do you know? And most of them, it's a fucking gut feeling. Like, yeah, they could do due diligence as much as they can, even for life sciences. Like, unless you're in clinical trials, and even if you are in clinical trials, you still don't know. So, like, you never know which investment is gonna work out, right? But I think that chemistry, that relationship with your investors, like, it's so important that you have to find the right one. So that fit, like you were telling, it's so important. Like, my investors, I end up not noticing only when I closed my seed round, and we went to the PR people to do all the PR, that my investors were 4 women and 1 man, and the man was Jewish. So I was like, really look like the founders. Like, one of them was Latino, the other one's Jewish, and the other 3 were women. So it's like, they literally look like the founders. So they fund what they look like because it's what they know. So sometimes you just have to change what they see and what they know. That's what we all have to try and work on. But
and that's why, Maria, it's so important to have the diversity for those people who are writing the checks, which is what we discussed in our first panel. This is so great. Awesome. Well, now we want to open it up to audience questions. Let me pull up the questions that we have here. So we have 2 from Renee Martin. The first question is around describing your journey of being leaders in the field with respect to overcoming barriers. And I think you touched on that a little bit. So I'm going to combine these 2 questions. So just overcoming barriers and being leaders in the field, and then just thoughts on improving representation in clinical trials, which we also touched briefly as well, but feel free to add any additional thoughts in those 2, please.
I know with regards to, and I did this within my own business structure, but I also did it with regards to our patient population, who we were connecting with, who were our niche target markets. From the moment I started this business, I knew that diversity was critical. I knew the diversity was critical, not just as a leader, but also in how I built my team and how it was that I developed the internal processes of member management and working with different populations. So what we started doing was we developed programs. We actually developed outside of our entire business model. We developed programs that focused on underrepresented communities, which had the highest prevalence of diabetes. And these were Native Americans, African Americans, Hispanics. And we said, we're going to target these populations. We're going to get grant funding so that we can support these populations. And it's now built into our mission as a company. We're no longer just a company that's out for profit. We are a mission and a social-based driver for change by tackling the issue directly with the populations that are most at risk. And at the same time, culturally, within our own selves, I'm the luckiest person in the world because I have the most diverse team I can possibly imagine. I mean, from Israel to Japan to Korea to the Netherlands. I mean, our team is everywhere, Colombia, and I love it. And I think it's not something we put, and I heard this recently, it's not something that we have to put on paper and say we just show up. And I think that's very important as we build diversity and inclusion in both health and within our businesses.
Great. One of the audience questions from Rosalita is, what would you advise? Should you fund an advisory board before launching the business, or build the business first and then look for advisory advisors in the future? What's the right stage to bring in an advisory board?
You should have a business. I mean, if you don't have a business, then what are you looking at advisors for? Like, at least have an idea, like a premise, and maybe start going to people and telling them, pitching them your idea and telling them what you're doing. Nobody's going to steal it. Building a company is very difficult. Even if they steal it, they have to put so many years and so much funding. Like, you don't lose anything by just going out there and asking people and getting their feedback. Once you get that feedback, like that kind of, for when you're a tech company, like that's called like MVP, like it starts putting you some start kind of ideas of what you should be building, and maybe start talking to customers, because that's your client, that's who you're going to be selling to. So you can get the idea. So your MVP, you could have it as soon as you can, so you can start showcasing. And those people that mentored you or gave you feedback earlier on, they could be your mentors. And maybe if they're not them, maybe somebody higher than them, or somebody that they know. But that's how you really, I think that's a good way to start.
And I think that's a great clarifying point, because mentors and advisors are most times separate from a full advisory board. An advisory board is something that happens after company formation, when you have, more of a structure in place. But certainly as you get started, you need the input of people who have gone before you, who can share their learnings. Okay, so I think we have time for one last question, which I'm going to pose to all of you. What has been the biggest mistake that you've learned on this journey? What did you learn from it, and how is that, enriching you for the future?
I'll start. I have learned about the need to appropriately value your company and yourself. So I was so nervous at the beginning when we were setting our val caps. I mean, it was like arguments amongst the team. There's no way we're worth 10 million. There's no way we're worth 30 million. But it was my own anxiety, and being geographically located in a place where it was an anomaly to, have a val cap over 15 million at any point. So it was like, very difficult to navigate. And I wish that I had earlier on recognized just how valuable our technology was, and just how big the impact it could have is. And I think that we've definitely recovered from that, and we're moving in the right direction. I just feel like I could have raised a lot more at a much better val cap. But that was my own lesson that I had to learn is, you know what, don't base your value on that of other people's. Fight for it until you get there. And then once you're there, you just own it, and that's what, if I could do anything over again, that's what I would do. I would have started valuing us appropriately earlier.
Love it. Lorenna, Maria?
Okay, I'll mute myself. Yeah, biggest lesson. I think that kind of goes to the value, but when you're starting a company, it's, partners are extremely important. So you're always trying to like get your client and pharma, and when you're innovating and there's no industry and there's nobody that kind of knows your stuff, everyone wants to try it, but for free. Like, no, stop it. Effing charge them. Like, your company could go down because people just you're not charging. So like, you really have to like value, like make sure that you're valuing your product and your services and everything you're building. Like even though if you're doing sweat equity earlier on, that's where it costs money, costs value, costs resources, people, and you should put prices accordingly and fight for that. If that partner is not right, just try to find as many as you can, because the earlier you can just generate revenue, the better you will be, and you don't have to get dilutive capital and get money from investors. You can continue building a company, like mine. I'm building a biotech that is organic,
Great.
which that's not normal. People don't do that. But
Yeah.
if you get it done, then you can look at which investors you want to let in, which is very, very different position to be in. And I think it's the best position, and that's why every single person should go after. Deciding and vetting and interviewing them as much as they interview you, because it's a partnership and relationship-based business, and successful companies have that as a commonality. We should aspire to do that.
Great. And in the last few minutes, Lorenna, quickly, lessons learned.
Of course. I think one of the biggest lessons for me had to do with the financial aspect. Very naively, I thought, just go meet with VCs, show them your idea, show them the framework, and they're going to give you the money because you're pre-seed. And wake up call, doesn't work like that. It's not Shark Tank. So I literally had to sit down and say, okay, so wait a minute. If it's not VCs, where do I get the money from? So I literally bootstrapped. I bought probably 6 different books. I started reading about how to build my company by myself, and then bringing in the right people at the right time. And just one word of advice, something that I had to learn, was focus on growing, like Luisa said, growing organically to the point where you can make revenue. If you still require money, then focus on angel investors, on individuals who believe in your mission, who can give you that small money to get yourself to that revenue or to that launch phase, and then build your company through the income that you're generating. I think the biggest value you could do to yourself as a company is by growing through that organic capital that you're making. And then at some point, you're going to reach a certain limit and everyone's going to be looking at you. You don't have to look for them any longer. Now they're going to be looking for you. Yep. So I think you have to be very strategic. And that was my lesson. I learned it well.
But you can see the bar that we've set. It's so high.
Yes.
It's so high.
Raise the bar. Well, audience, please say thank you to our panelists. This was just amazing. Thank you for sharing your insights. Look out for more information. Like I said, we're trying to make sure that the community is engaged. And if you are a check writer, these ladies might not want your capital. I don't know, but reach out to them all the same. They might be too hard for you. I'm not sure. But please, let's continue to support each other in the ecosystem. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday. Bye. Bye, ladies. Thank you so much.